I've been playing Santa for 7 years now, and I can tell you that while it's one of the most rewarding experiences of my life, it's also one of the most emotionally devastating. Almost every year, at least one kid gets me right in the chest with a wish that has nothing to do with toys or video games, and everything to do with the kind of pain no child should ever have to feel. The first time it happened, I was completely unprepared. This little boy, maybe 6 years old, climbed up onto my lap with this serious expression on his face. He was wearing a threadbare jacket that was clearly too small for him, and his sneakers had holes in the toes. He had these big brown eyes that seemed way too old for his age, like he'd already seen more of the world's ugliness than any first grader should. When I gave him my usual cheerful "and what would you like for Christmas, young man?" he didn't hesitate for even a second. "I don't want anything for me," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I just want a family for my sister." I froze. The photographer stopped adjusting her camera. The elf volunteer who was helping kids up onto my lap actually gasped. "What the hell do you say to that?" My mind went completely blank. Here I was, dressed up in this ridiculous red suit with a fake beard that was making my face itch, supposed to represent magic and joy and all the good things about childhood. And this kid was asking me to solve something that no amount of Christmas magic could fix. I asked him gently where his sister was, and he explained that they were in different foster homes. He got to see her sometimes, but she was sad all the time and he wanted her to have a real family that would make her happy. His own situation didn't seem to matter to him at all. He just wanted his little sister to be okay. I managed to stumble through some response about how Santa would do his very best, that his sister was lucky to have such a caring big brother, and that love was the most important thing he could give her. But inside I was absolutely wrecked. That night, after I got home and took off the suit, I sat in my car in my driveway for 20 minutes just crying. My wife found me there and thought something terrible had happened. In a way, I guess something had. I just realized how heartbreaking this job could actually be. But that wasn't the last time something like that would happen. Not by a long shot. The next year, I thought I was better prepared. I'd been doing this long enough that I figured I could handle whatever came my way. I'd practiced keeping my composure, reminding myself that staying in character was important for all the other kids watching. Then this little girl, couldn't have been more than 7, came bouncing up to me with pigtails tied with red ribbons and a Christmas sweater covered in reindeer. She seemed so happy and excited that I relaxed, thinking this would be an easy one. She was clutching a photo in her hand, and as she climbed onto my lap, she carefully smoothed out the picture. It showed a man in military uniform, smiling at the camera, desert sand visible in the background. "What would you like Santa to bring you this Christmas?" I asked with my best jolly Santa voice. Her smile didn't fade, but her eyes got very serious. She held up the photo so I could see it better. "I want you to make sure my daddy comes back from Afghanistan alive. Mommy cries at night when she thinks I'm sleeping, and I heard her tell Grandma that she's scared. So I need you to protect him, okay? That's all I want." I was speechless. Completely and utterly speechless. What do you say to a child who's terrified that her father might die halfway around the world? How do you maintain the Santa character when a kid is asking you to perform an actual miracle? I could feel my throat tightening, and I had to clear it several times before I could respond. I told her that her daddy was very brave, and that everyone was working hard to keep him safe. I said that I knew her daddy was fighting so hard to come home to his beautiful little girl, and that the best thing she could do was be brave too and send him lots of love in her heart. I asked her if she wrote letters to him, and she nodded enthusiastically, saying she sent him drawings every week. "Then you keep doing that," I told her, "because those letters are like magic. They give your daddy strength when he's far away." After she left, carefully tucking the photo back into her pocket, I had to take a break. I told the coordinator I needed 15 minutes, and I went outside behind the community center. The other volunteers found me sitting on the cold concrete steps, still in full costume, just staring at nothing. One of the other helpers, an older woman who'd been doing this for years, sat down next to me. "Afghanistan girl?" she asked quietly. I nodded. "Had one of those last year," she said. "Dad came home safe. Lost a leg, but he came home. I hope this one makes it too." That's when I realized that being Santa isn't about the fun stuff. It's not about the kids who want bicycles or dolls or the latest gaming console. Those requests are easy and sweet and exactly what you expect. But the real weight of the role comes from being the person that children trust with their deepest, most desperate wishes. When a kid tells Santa what they really want, they're not thinking about whether it's realistic or whether it's the kind of thing that belongs on a Christmas list. They're thinking that maybe, just maybe, this magical person can fix the thing that's breaking their heart. It's simultaneously the best day and the worst day of the year when I put on that suit. One year, we were doing a big community event at the mall. There were probably 300 kids there over the course of the day, and they all got to come take pictures with me and tell me what they wanted. Most of it was the usual stuff: toys, clothes, puppies. Sorry, kids, Santa doesn't deliver living creatures. Several requests for $1 million from kids who clearly had no concept of money. I was getting into a good rhythm, ho-ho-hoing my way through the afternoon, when this little boy came up. He couldn't have been more than 3 years old, still had that toddler wobble when he walked. His foster mom had to help him up onto my lap because he was so small, and she was making encouraging noises, asking him if he wanted to tell Santa what he wanted for Christmas. He had this serious little face with the chubbiest cheeks you've ever seen, and he looked right at me with these enormous blue eyes that held complete trust. In the clearest voice, without any of the usual toddler speech impediments or hesitation, he said, "I want a mommy and daddy," just like that. No hesitation, no explanation, just stating it as a simple fact. Like he was ordering from a menu. Like it was the most obvious thing in the world that this was what he needed. The foster mom's face crumpled immediately. She turned away, her shoulders shaking. The elf helper, a college student who was doing this as a volunteer gig, had tears streaming down her face. The photographer lowered her camera without taking the picture. I won't lie, Santa cried a little that day. I tried to hold it together, but a couple tears definitely escaped from behind my glasses and got lost in my fake beard. Here was this tiny human being, barely old enough to understand what family even meant, and he knew with absolute certainty that he didn't have one. He understood that other kids had something he didn't, and he wanted it with all his little heart. I pulled him into a hug, and he wrapped his tiny arms around my neck. I could feel him playing with my beard, curious about whether it was real. I told him that Santa was going to work extra hard on that one, and that he should be a very good boy because special wishes took special magic. It was all I could think to say without completely breaking down right there. The foster mom finally composed herself enough to come back over. She was apologizing, saying she didn't know he would say that, but I waved her off. She picked him up, and he waved at me with his little hand as they walked away. For those who need resolution on that one, and I know you do because I desperately needed it too, he was adopted by the parents who were fostering him at the time. They'd been planning to all along, but the paperwork wasn't finalized yet. The adoption took another 6 months to go through, but it happened. When they sent me a photo the next spring of the 3 of them together at his Adoption Day celebration, all of them wearing matching shirts that said, "Forever Family," I cried all over again. But those were good tears, the kind that restore your faith in humanity just a little bit. Another year, probably my 4th or 5th as Santa, I had a little boy come up who seemed very anxious. He kept looking back at his teacher, who was standing nearby with an encouraging expression, nodding at him to go ahead. He was probably 8 or 9, old enough that some kids that age are starting to figure out the Santa thing isn't real, but he seemed to desperately want to believe. When he finally sat down and I asked him what he wanted for Christmas, he bit his lip for a long moment before speaking. "I want my sister back," he said, his voice cracking slightly. My heart sank. I thought maybe he meant she had died, and I was already preparing myself for that particular heartbreak, trying to figure out what words could possibly offer comfort. But when I gently asked him to tell me more about his sister, he said she was living in California with their dad, and he missed her so much he couldn't stand it. "We used to share a room," he said, and now the words were tumbling out like he'd been holding them in forever. "She's only 10 months older than me, and we did everything together. We'd build forts and play video games, and she'd help me with my homework. But now she's gone and Dad won't let her call me very much, and Mom says Dad's a bad word that I'm not supposed to say, and I just want to see her. I want to show her my new school and my new room, and I want her to meet my friend Marcus who lives next door. After his visit, the teacher came over and quietly explained the situation. There had been a very bitter custody battle between the parents, and in the end, one parent had taken their favorite child, the little girl, and moved to another state. The boy was left with the other parent, and the kids barely got to see each other anymore. The parents were so toxic toward each other that they were using the children as weapons, each one trying to hurt the other by limiting contact with the kids. He talks about her every single day, the teacher told me, her voice tight with anger. Every single day. He draws pictures of the two of them together. He writes her letters that I don't even know if she ever gets. It's heartbreaking. This kid, who should have been asking for video games or sports equipment or whatever boys his age normally want, didn't want toys or games or anything material. He just wanted his family back together. He wanted to be able to play with his sister again, to have dinner together, to be a normal sibling instead of a casualty of his parents' war against each other. I gave him the biggest hug I could manage in that bulky suit and told him that some wishes take longer than others, but that didn't mean they wouldn't come true. I told him to keep loving his sister, keep thinking about her, because that love was like an invisible string connecting them no matter how many miles were between them. I have no idea what happened with that situation. I hope those kids found their way back to each other eventually. I hope their parents eventually pulled their heads out of their asses and realized what they were doing to their children. But I don't know, and that uncertainty haunts me sometimes. The thing is, when you're Santa, you become this repository for hope. Kids tell you things they might not tell anyone else because you're supposed to be magic. You're supposed to be able to do the impossible. And yeah, sometimes it's ridiculous stuff like, I want a rocket ship, or I want to be a dinosaur. And you can laugh about that. But other times, kids tell you about the holes in their lives, the absences that hurt them, the fears that keep them up at night. I've had kids ask me to cure their parents' cancer. One little girl, maybe 5 years old, told me very seriously that her mommy was sick and losing all her hair, and could I please make her better? She had drawn a picture of her mom with long blonde hair and wanted me to keep it so I'd know what her mom was supposed to look like when I fixed her. I've had kids ask me to stop their parents from fighting. A boy once told me he wanted soundproof walls in his room, so he wouldn't have to hear his parents screaming at each other at night. He was maybe 7 years old and already looking for ways to block out trauma. I've had kids ask me to bring back dead pets, dead grandparents, dead siblings. One child, a little girl with the saddest eyes I've ever seen, asked me if Santa's magic was strong enough to bring people back from heaven. When I gently asked who she wanted to come back, she told me about her baby brother who had died from SIDS. She wanted to hold him again. She was 6 years old and carrying that grief. I've had kids ask for food, for warm clothes, for a house that doesn't leak when it rains. One boy asked for a coat for his mom because she'd given him hers and now she was cold all the time. Another asked for groceries. Just straight up asked Santa for groceries because his family didn't have enough food. Every single one of those requests is a gut punch because behind each one is a story of struggle and loss that no child should have to live through. There was one year where I had twins come up together, a boy and a girl, probably about 6 years old. They were clearly excited but also nervous, whispering to each other before approaching. When they finally sat down one on each knee, they looked at each other, seemed to have some kind of silent communication, and then spoke in unison, "We want our parents to love each other again." They went on to explain that their parents were getting divorced, that Daddy was moving out after Christmas, and that they'd heard their parents talking about how they didn't love each other anymore. But the kids were convinced that if Santa could make their parents love each other again, everything would go back to normal. How do you explain to 6-year-olds that Santa can't fix broken marriages? That sometimes adults fall out of love and there's no magic solution? I told them that sometimes families change shape, but that doesn't mean there's less love. It just means the love gets arranged differently. I said their parents would always love them, even if they couldn't live together anymore. The little girl started crying, and her brother put his arm around her. "But we want it to be like before," he said, and the desperation in his voice nearly broke me. But here's what keeps me coming back year after year, despite the emotional toll. Sometimes you get to be part of something good. Sometimes you hear back that the dad did come home from Afghanistan safely. Sometimes you find out that the foster kid got adopted. Sometimes you learn that the family's situation improved, that the parents' cancer went into remission, that things got better. I found out that the little girl whose dad was in Afghanistan, he made it home. The mom brought her back the next year to take another photo with Santa, and she told me. The dad had come with them, and after the photo was done, he came over and shook my hand. He thanked me for being there for his daughter when he couldn't be. I had to take another break after that one because I was crying too hard to see straight. The grocery kid, one of the volunteers, overheard his request and quietly connected the family with local food banks and assistance programs. Sometimes being Santa means being part of a network of people who actually can help with the real-world problems. And even when you don't hear the resolution, even when you never find out what happened to that particular child, you know that for just a few minutes you gave them hope. You let them believe that someone was listening, that someone cared, that their wish mattered. You gave them permission to voice their pain and to believe that maybe, somehow, it could be fixed. That's what being Santa really is. It's not about the presents or the photos or the performance. It's about being a safe place for children to express their truest, deepest wishes. It's about holding space for their joy and their sorrow, their excitement and their fear. It's about reminding them that they matter, that they're seen, that someone is rooting for them. So yeah, I'll keep putting on the suit. I'll keep saying ho ho ho, and asking kids what they want for Christmas. And I'll keep crying in my car afterwards when a kid asks for something I can't possibly deliver. Because even if I can't give them what they're really asking for, I can give them a moment of magic, a moment of hope, a moment where they feel heard. And sometimes, in this broken world, that's the most important gift of all. Every year when December rolls around and it's time to pull out the red suit again, I have this moment of hesitation. I think about all the heartbreak I'm about to witness, all the impossible wishes I'll hear, all the tears I'll fight back. But then I think about that little boy who got adopted, about the soldier who came home safe, about all the kids who just needed someone to listen. And I put on the suit anyway, because being Santa isn't about being magical. It's about being present. It's about showing up for kids when they need someone to believe in, even when the world is falling apart around them. And if I can do that, even for just a few minutes, then every tear is worth it.